Hey guys, tonight we're tucking ourselves into something even less glamorous than medieval plumbing, the tragic, heroic, and sometimes genuinely weird menu of the forgotten foods Roman peasants grew just to survive. Forget the emperors lounging on couches with grapes and peacock tongues. This is about the people who could only dream of leftovers, whose dinner plans involved staring at a turnip and wondering if it counts as a vegetable or an emotional support object. Before you settle in, go ahead and like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this bizarre historical sleep therapy I'm creating here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether your fridge has anything inside it besides old mustard. Seriously, I need to know I'm not the only one. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that ancient white noise ambience, and get comfortable. Maybe wrap yourself up in every available blanket, because tonight we're serving up cold, hard peasant realities with a side of, wait, they ate what? Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what Roman peasants actually ate when there was nothing left at the market but a single suspicious beet? Did anyone actually like barley porridge, or was it just edible sadness? Was their version of a cheat day sneaking in a wild snail, or was that more of a protein panic attack? Could you survive on a diet of cabbage, acorns, and whatever you managed to dig up before the landlord noticed? And what exactly counts as a forgotten food? Are we talking rare grains, secret root vegetables, or that one time someone ate moss and instantly regretted it? Congratulations. You've just woken up somewhere in the Roman Empire, in a peasant's stone and mud hovel. Your sandals are falling apart, your stomach's already rumbling, and the only thing on the menu tonight is whatever you can grow, steal, or barter. Good luck. The rooster hasn't even crowed, but you're already awake. Why? Because your stomach is auditioning for a role as a percussion instrument. Welcome to Roman peasant life, where breakfast is mostly a concept and your pillow is made of straw, anxiety, and possibly a beetle. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, which, to be clear, is just a sagging mat of reeds, smoke stains, and the occasional spider with a real can-do attitude. Sunlight hasn't bothered to show up yet, but your body knows what's coming. Another day of, will there be food or is it just vibes? Your bed isn't exactly sleep technology at its finest. It's a sack stuffed with straw, some of which you suspect was recently home to something with more legs than you'd prefer. Every time you move, it creaks and crunches, providing a soundscape somewhere between rustic countryside and rodent panic attack. The Roman version of a weighted blanket is just a really heavy feeling of existential dread, and a woolen cloak that smells faintly of goat. Congratulations, you've made it through the night. Or, more accurately, you've survived until the hour before dawn, which is when the real fun begins. Your first alarm clock is not the gentle hum of a phone, but the sharp, insistent chill of Roman air on your face, because the fire went out around midnight. You're already shivering, trying not to wake your sleeping relatives, who have mastered the ancient art of unconscious blanket theft. You tug at the covers and realize your cousin is cocooned in them like a smug little emperor. You'd like to snooze, but sleep is a luxury for people who don't have to decide whether to eat the leftover turnip or plant it. Your stomach grumbles again, now shifting from polite request to open rebellion. You start thinking about breakfast. Spoiler: breakfast, if it exists, is either barley gruel or a single crust of bread that could double as a building material. With nothing left to do, you contemplate your options. You could get up and check if there's any pottage left in the communal pot. There isn't. Or you could try to remember the last time you actually felt full. Was it the festival 3 months ago? Or that time someone dropped a whole sack of millet in the street and you accidentally helped yourself? Outside, you can just make out the first bleary shapes of the farmyard. A few chickens, the world's grumpiest goat, and a rooster who, frankly, is running behind schedule. Roman alarm clocks are unreliable at best, but your stomach is always on time. Eventually, the rest of the family begins to stir. There's the groan of tired joints, a collective sigh, and the daily chorus of, "Who stole my sandals?" It's always the dog. The dog has never eaten a sandal in his life, but he gets blamed anyway. Personal space doesn't exist. You share everything: bed, blanket, air. and occasionally the surprise sensation of someone else's foot in your ribs. You drag yourself upright, rubbing your eyes with hands that smell like a combination of old garlic and dirt. No one looks rested. Everyone looks hungry. This is just how it goes. You start the day already a little bit behind. The family gathers around the hearth, not for warmth, it's still out, but for hope. Someone pokes at the pot, hoping to conjure food from thin air, as if that would ever work. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is yesterday's barley, reanimated with a splash of suspicious water. The flavor profile is earthy, with undertones of gritty and why does it taste like moss? The children ask for honey. You all laugh because the only honey in this house is a rumor. The day stretches before you, full of chores, more hunger, and the faintest glimmer that maybe, just maybe, someone will find an egg. In the meantime, you munch on your bread and plan your escape into work, into the fields, into another day where food is both a necessity and a fantasy. But for now, you're just a Roman peasant, hungry before the sun, awake before the rooster, and dreaming of a world where breakfast comes with options. Before quinoa and oat milk, there was barley, the Roman peasant's best frenemy. You chew it, you mash it, you grind it into porridge. It tastes like disappointment, but it keeps you alive. And in Rome, that's really saying something. Barley is the ancient equivalent of that friend who always shows up to your parties uninvited, never brings anything, but somehow still manages to save the day. Wheat? That's for the upper crust. Literally. The rich are over there with their fine white loaves and smug expressions. You're in a committed relationship with barley, whether you like it or not. Your day starts and ends with barley. In the morning, there's barley porridge, a greyish, lumpy concoction that looks like something you'd use to patch a leaky roof. There's no sugar, no cinnamon, no Instagrammable drizzle of honey, just boiled grain, water, and the realization that you'll be eating this again for dinner. If you're feeling fancy, maybe you'll sprinkle in some wild greens or the occasional stray lentil, like confetti at a very sad parade. You spend a lot of time with barley, and over time, you learn its secrets, like how it never ever softens all the way, no matter how long you cook it. Each mouthful is an adventure in jaw, strength, and patience. Roman dentists, if they existed, would have made a fortune, because nothing ruins your teeth quite like eating what is essentially edible gravel 3 times a day. The best thing about barley, besides its near immortality, is that it grows anywhere. Drought? Barley shrugs. Rocky soil? Barley says, sure, why not? Too much rain, too little rain, plague of frogs, minor earthquake. Barley perseveres with the sort of stubborn optimism that most peasants gave up around the last time Rome was invaded. You can do a lot with barley, at least in theory. You can grind it into flour and bake rough, dark bread that doubles as a self-defense weapon. You can make a thin, soupy gruel for when you're feeding 10 people and only have enough grain for 3. And if you're lucky enough to live near a slightly less supervised corner of the countryside, you might even ferment some of it into a kind of proto-beer, a drink that tastes mostly like barnyard and poor decisions. But hey, it's safer than water. Barley is the blank canvas of Roman cuisine. The rich fill theirs with honey, spices, and nuts, turning it into something almost edible. You, on the other hand, add a pinch of wild herbs if you have them, or just a handful of hope. Every bite is a reminder that flavor was not the goal, survival was. And barley helps with that, too. It's hearty, filling, and takes forever to digest. This is less a culinary feature and more of a digestive warning label. If you're not used to eating barley, you'll find out the hard way. Barley sticks with you, sometimes for longer than you'd like. Of course, the best part about barley is its role in social life. Roman peasants gather around the communal pot and swap barley-based horror stories. Remember the winter of the double barley harvest? Someone will say, and everyone will groan. Children are threatened with extra helpings of barley if they misbehave. Barley is not just food, it's a disciplinary tool. There's also the famous barley pancake, which is what happens when someone tries to get creative and fails spectacularly. The end result is a thin, rubbery disc that tastes like regret and sticks to your teeth for days. Even the dog turns up its nose at a cold barley pancake. But for all its faults, barley keeps you alive. You won't starve with barley in the cupboard. You might dream about wheat, about honey cakes, about anything else, but you'll live to complain another day. And in the grand tradition of Roman peasants, that's the real miracle. So you raise a cracked wooden bowl of barley porridge to your lips, chew, 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 and accept your fate. Barley. It's not glamorous, but it gets the job done. Forget superfoods. Millet is what you eat when you can't afford wheat, and you're pretending birdseed is a lifestyle choice. It's yellow, it's bland, and it might be in your next dozen meals. In the pecking order of Roman grains, millet sits somewhere just above ground-up twigs and just below stuff that gets stuck in your sandals. Wheat is for the rich, barley is for the stubborn, and millet is for the desperate or those with a surprisingly strong sense of optimism. If you're a Roman peasant, your relationship with millet is less a matter of taste and more a question of survival. Millet doesn't care if you're excited about dinner. Millet is just here, being round, humble, and quietly resentful of all the attention quinoa gets in the 21st century. Your first encounter with millet probably happened before you could walk, and, let's be honest, probably before you could chew properly. Millet porridge is a rite of passage. One spoonful, and you understand why Roman peasants rarely smiled at breakfast. It's the sort of meal that's more about texture than flavour. Soft, slightly gritty, and somehow dry and wet at the same time. You'll chew, then chew some more, and then spend the rest of the morning finding little millet grains lodged in your molars. It's not all bad news, though. Millet is easy to grow, which in peasant terms means not actively trying to die. The soil can be terrible, the weather unpredictable, the goats extremely determined, and millet will still manage to produce a decent harvest. It's like the plant version of that one neighbour who keeps showing up to every event, unimpressed by setbacks, unfazed by hardship, and always wearing the same beige tunic. You can do many things with millet, most of them unexciting. Boil it into a porridge, bake it into a dense loaf, or make what can only be described as proto-granola, minus the sweetness, the nuts, or the joy. Sometimes you'll eat millet soup, a thin, watery affair that mostly exists so you can say you had soup. Add a little salt if you have it. Maybe a wilted wild herb for flair. And voila, you're dining like a Roman commoner with absolutely nothing left to lose. Millet is the great culinary equalizer. Everyone eats it, men, women, children, and the occasional livestock that manages to sneak into the storeroom. It fills your stomach, which is really all that food needs to do at this point in history, but it never fills your heart. No one ever dreams about millet. No poet ever wrote an ode to millet, unless you count that one time someone fell face first into a bowl and accidentally snored a haiku. Still, millet is resilient. When the wheat harvest fails and the barley is being difficult, millet is always there, waving its little yellow grains at you from the corner of the field, saying, "Don't worry, you'll never get rid of me. You can try roasting it, mashing it, even hiding it under something tastier, like onions or last year's cheese rind, but millet finds a way to make its presence known. Sometimes it even pops when you cook it, like a tiny edible drum roll for another underwhelming meal. Of course, there's the matter of what to drink with your millet dinner. Water, if you're feeling brave and lucky. More often, it's a thin, sour ale that manages to pair beautifully with regret. If you're especially fortunate, you might have a leftover grape skin or two to chew for dessert. It's not a feast, but it's dinner. And as you scrape the last stubborn grains from your wooden bowl, you remember that millet isn't here to impress you. It's here to keep you alive. In a world where tomorrow's meal is never guaranteed, that's the kind of loyalty you can respect, even if you never, ever crave it. So you sigh, swallow, and pat your stomach, which is now at least somewhat convinced it's been fed. Millet, not the grain Rome deserves, but absolutely the one it gets. Fava beans are the original love it or hate it legume, packed with protein, occasionally deadly if you're unlucky, and always suspiciously chalky. You'll eat them, but you'll never trust them. There's no escaping the fava bean in the life of a Roman peasant. They grow everywhere. In your neighbour's field, in the cracks near the roadside, probably in your nightmares. Roman authorities love fava beans because they're cheap, filling, and crucially, not for the rich. For you, they're just Tuesday, and Wednesday, and every day ending in day. When you're hungry, you're grateful for a hot bowl of fava bean stew. But you still keep an eye on it, because this is the only food that comes with a built-in sense of drama. Fava beans are famous for their protein content. In a world where meat is a rare treat and cheese is basically edible gold, beans are the best thing going. They're big, hearty, and, once boiled within an inch of their existence, surprisingly filling. They give you enough energy to dig ditches, weed barley, and occasionally run away from an angry goat. But fava beans also have a dark side. Some Romans believed they could trap the souls of the dead. Others noticed that certain people, after eating just a handful, became ill, sometimes fatally so. Welcome to favism, a genetic condition where eating fava beans actually triggers dangerous anemia. Of course, nobody in your village has ever heard of genetics, so the unlucky few who get sick are just considered extra unlucky, cursed, or maybe targeted by an angry bean spirit. Despite this, you soldier on. Peasant logic says if you haven't died from fava beans yet, you probably won't today. Every meal is an exercise in cautious optimism. You pick out the greenest, plumpest beans, boil them until they surrender, then eat with the same hopeful resignation as someone biting into an off-brand marshmallow. The flavour? It's bean-like, but also oddly earthy, with a texture that can only be described as medieval dental challenge. If you get a good bean, it's creamy and almost pleasant. If you get a bad one, well, that's why you keep your emergency water cup close. Sometimes you get lucky and find a recipe that calls for mashed fava beans, wild herbs, and a dash of hope. Other times, you just shovel them in, chew, and pray. Still, there's a certain community around fava beans. In the communal Roman kitchen, someone always has a story. My cousin's friend ate 3 bowls in one sitting and saw the gods. Or, don't eat the spotted ones, unless you want to meet your ancestors early. Beans spark conversation and occasionally panic, especially when old Aunt Lucilla pulls out her family's secret seasoning, whatever wild herb she found that day. Beans are also surprisingly versatile. You can stew them, mash them, or roast them until they're crunchy enough to chip a tooth. During festivals, you might even see a fava bean pancake. Don't get too excited. It's still just beans, but flatter and more portable. Ideal for a snack on the go. Or, more likely, a snack you eat in the field while pretending it's not the same thing you had for dinner last night. As you finish another meal, you reflect. There's no escaping the fava bean, but at least it's never boring. Every mouthful is a gamble between survival and a minor existential crisis. But it's yours and it's honest. Fava beans, proof that Roman peasants ate with courage, creativity, and just the tiniest dash of panic. You set your bowl aside, stomach mostly satisfied and heart only a little anxious. Fava beans, the ultimate what could possibly go wrong of the ancient dinner table. Sleep tight. The beans will still be here tomorrow. Nothing says, I'm doing my best, like a kitchen full of boiling cabbage. It's cheap, it's filling, and after 3 days it starts tasting like existential dread. Romans swore by it, mostly because there was nothing else. In the Roman peasant world, cabbage is not so much a food as a recurring event. It's the kind of ingredient that takes over your home and your nostrils for weeks on end, until the smell becomes less of a problem and more of a lifestyle. Forget air fresheners. Here, the perfume is cabbage, steamed, boiled, and occasionally scorched when someone dozes off by the fire. If you're lucky, there's a hint of smoke. If you're not, it's just cabbage. always cabbage. You wake up to cabbage, you work in fields dreaming of cabbage, and you go to sleep burping cabbage. It's a cycle of life that binds families together and clears out any house guests who might have overstayed their welcome. Your neighbours will always know when you're having cabbage for dinner, because they're having it too. It's the ultimate equalizer, no one escapes the scent. On the bright side, cabbage is incredibly practical. It grows in poor soil, survives frost, and can last through long Roman winters if you're careful or lucky. When the weather is grim and your food stores are lower than your hopes, there's always a chance you can find one more cabbage hiding in the cellar, somehow still alive, stubbornly refusing to wilt, even though you secretly wish it would. The culinary uses of cabbage are as creative as the Roman peasants' will to survive. Fresh cabbage gets chopped and thrown into whatever soup or stew is bubbling away in the communal pot. If you're feeling extravagant, you might add a turnip, a handful of barley, or yesterday's bread. But at its core, the meal is cabbage, and the core, well, that's also cabbage. After a while, you begin to taste the difference between Monday cabbage, which is crisp and lively, and Friday cabbage, which is mostly just surrender in leafy form. If you're really desperate, you eat it raw, which is a little like chewing on damp paper with a faint note of sadness. Still, it's better than nothing. Roman doctors swore by cabbage for everything: hangovers, stomachaches, maybe even a broken heart. And when it comes to ancient medicine, cabbage juice is the answer to most questions. Feeling sick? Drink cabbage juice. Achy knees? Cabbage poultice. Soul crushed by another week of barley and millet? At least the cabbage hasn't given up on you. Cabbage is also a social food. Stewing it requires time and a large pot, which means someone has to mind the fire, someone has to stir, and someone else has to chase off the chicken who keeps trying to get a taste. The whole family gathers around the pot, trading stories and arguing over whether today's batch is better or worse than last week's. There's a certain pride in comparing notes on the optimal way to keep cabbage from boiling into mush, although the truth is, it almost always turns into mush anyway. Of course, there are consequences. Your house smells like boiled brassica for days. Your breath becomes a public safety hazard, and every meal ends with someone mumbling, "I can't wait for spring greens." But there's comfort in predictability. Cabbage never lets you down. It might let you down gently, but at least it's always there. As you lay in bed at the end of another cabbage-filled day, the aroma clinging to your tunic and drifting through the straw roof, you realize that survival is a little like eating cabbage. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting, and you'll never crave it, but it keeps you going. And for a Roman peasant, that's enough. So you pull your cabbage-scented blanket up to your chin, close your eyes, and promise yourself that tomorrow, maybe, just maybe, there'll be something different for dinner. There won't be. But hope, like cabbage, is remarkably hard to kill. Lentils are the little brownish discs that save you from certain doom. Easy to grow, easy to stew, and impossible to ruin unless you forget them on the fire and create the world's first edible brick. If barley is the cranky old neighbour, and cabbage is the nosy aunt, lentils are that dependable friend who shows up quietly, fixes your problems, and asks nothing in return. Roman peasants don't write poems about lentils. They don't name their children after lentils. But they do, secretly, thank the gods every time another handful makes it into the soup pot. Unlike the drama of fava beans or the self-esteem issues of millet, lentils never try to be something they're not. They're small, humble, and totally unpretentious. Lentils grow even when nothing else wants to. Forget fertile riverbanks and rich volcanic slopes. Give lentils a patch of dirt, some inconsistent sunshine, and the occasional encouraging word, and they'll pop up anyway, almost out of spite. Harvesting lentils is a family affair. You, your siblings, your elderly grandmother with knees like rusty hinges, everyone's in the field, crawling along in a desperate race against the birds, who are also major lentil fans. You collect what you can, shake off the dust, and try not to think about the pebbles that look suspiciously similar to your dinner. Back in the kitchen, lentils become the centerpiece of what can only be described as cautiously optimistic cuisine. The classic Roman peasant stew is lentils, water, a bit of salt if you've been well behaved, and whatever else is lying around. Carrot tops? Toss them in. An onion so old it's become philosophy? Why not? Some ancient recipe scrolls call for bay leaves, cumin, or coriander, but your spice rack is currently just a dream you had once during a fever. Cooking lentils is a test of patience and vigilance. Too short, and they're crunchy, like eating little brown teeth. Too long, and you're chiseling them out of the bottom of the pot, where they fuse into a single, fossilized mass of regret. The ideal is somewhere in between, where the stew is thick, the flavor is fine, and everyone agrees it could be worse. Lentils' real superpower is their ability to stretch. A handful feeds a family. A potful lasts a week, if you can keep the neighbors from borrowing a cup here and there. Unlike barley or fava beans, lentils don't judge you for coming back for thirds. They want you to be full. They want you to survive another day of weeding, hoeing, and fending off suspiciously organized geese. The best thing about lentils, though, is their predictability. You know what you're getting every time. There are no dangerous genetic surprises or culinary curveballs. Nobody ever says, "Grandma ate lentils and now she's convinced she's a sheep." Lentils simply nourish. You feel your energy returning with every bland, slightly mushy bite. Of course, there are downsides. Lentil breath is a force of nature. Your household develops an aroma somewhere between old shoe and ambitious compost pile. And if you thought beans had social side effects, let's just say that after a big lentil dinner, everyone is a little more aware of the importance of ventilation. But what's a little family bonding without the occasional need to air out the house? Lentils also make you dream. Not because they're exciting, but because as you eat them, you imagine a life with more flavor, more meat, more, well, anything. Lentils don't mind. They're happy being the base layer, the thing you build dreams on. Reliable, filling, and never flashy. So as you finish another bowl, scraping up every last humble disc, you can't help but feel grateful. In the grand, exhausting saga of Roman peasant life, lentils are the steady companion you never asked for but always needed. Sleep well. Tomorrow, there will be more lentils, and you'll eat them, and you'll keep going. That's their secret, and yours. Foraging is a fun modern hobby, but for Roman peasants, it was a daily gamble. Is that leafy thing edible, medicinal, or just aggressively laxative? Only one way to find out. The concept of salad hasn't been invented yet. At least, not the kind with artfully drizzled dressing and 12 price tags. For a Roman peasant, salad is whatever green thing you found growing between your foot and a suspiciously angry-looking toad. Dandelion leaves? Sure. Sorrel? Why not? Nettle? Only if you enjoy eating while being stung. The wild is your grocery store, except the return policy is immediate regret. Your day starts with a quick breakfast of not much, followed by a reluctant trip outside to see what's growing. Armed with a basket and the vague hope that you remember which plants are edible, you scour the hedgerows, ditches and fields for anything remotely leafy. Maybe you spot something the sheep ignored. Maybe you spot something the sheep bit, tasted, and spat out, which, in peasant logic, is probably a warning. Experience is the only teacher here. Your grandmother once ate the wrong leaf and spent the next week in what historians now call medieval gastrointestinal distress. Family wisdom passes down which plants are safe, which are for emergencies only, and which are to be fed to your annoying cousin as an experiment. Sometimes the rules change overnight. That plant you thought was fine? Turns out it's only safe if you cook it, boil it twice, and mutter a small prayer. The fun part is that wild greens don't just fill the gap between hunger and starvation, they add variety. Well, variety might be a strong word. Sometimes the difference is whether your lunch is slightly bitter, extremely bitter, or makes you see colours. Lamb's lettuce and purslane are genuinely tasty, if you find them before the goats do. Dandelions offer a tangy crunch. Nettles add a unique sting, and wild garlic gives you a fighting chance at flavor and also personal space. Of course, there's a reason most ancient recipes boil everything into mush. Boiling is insurance. It kills parasites, wilts stubborn fibers, and neutralizes most of the accidental toxins you may have just collected. Sometimes you end up with a green stew that tastes like sadness, mud, and faint hope. Sometimes you end up inventing ancient Pepto-Bismol by accident. Still, you persist. It's not like you have a choice. Hunger, after all, is a powerful motivator, and wild greens are the closest thing you'll get to vitamins this side of a miraculous fish showing up in your pot. Children are taught the difference between sour but survivable, and never ever touch that, unless you're planning an early exit. Even the livestock get suspicious when you wander by with a handful of new leaves, eyeing you as if they know you're about to experiment. Every successful forage is a tiny victory. You return home with a handful of leaves and a story about how you almost ate a frog by mistake. Into the pot they go, alongside barley, lentils, or whatever root vegetable hasn't grown legs and left on its own. You eat your foraged stew, carefully watching for tingling lips, weird dreams, or that one cousin who always gets the hiccups at the worst possible moment. Wild greens also make you philosophical. You ponder why some leaves are delicious while others are instant regret. You wonder who the first brave soul was who looked at a spiky nettle and thought, maybe if I cook this for a really long time. You start to believe that survival, like salad, is mostly about guessing and hoping you're right. As you finish your foraged feast, stomach only mildly protesting, you congratulate yourself. You've survived another day in the wild salad bar of Roman peasantry. The greens may be wild, but you're wilder at least, wild enough to try again tomorrow. Sleep easy. With any luck, tonight's dreams won't be in Technicolor. The humble turnip. Starchy, reliable, and shaped like hope itself. Boil it, mash it, or just gnaw on it raw. Your taste buds gave up complaining ages ago. Turnips are the utility player of the Roman peasant diet. Not glamorous, not mysterious, just always there, lurking at the bottom of every root cellar and the top of every "what's for dinner" conversation. You can count on turnips the way you can count on taxes and waking up itchy. They never run out. They just get wrinklier, smaller, and slightly more judgmental as winter drags on. For all their lack of excitement, turnips offer one huge advantage. They actually grow. Bad soil? Too cold? Plague of angry ducks? No matter. The turnip shrugs off adversity and flourishes, like the stubborn peasant it was born to feed. You don't so much cultivate turnips as threaten them with mild neglect and hope for the best. And they reward you, every time, with another crop of pale, slightly lumpy roots. Harvest time is always a mix of hope and grim resignation. You dig up your patch, clutching the green tops, praying this year's turnips will be more meal and less punishment. Sometimes you get lucky, a big, round, creamy specimen that feels almost festive. More often, you get small, knobby, slightly suspicious roots that look like they'd rather be anywhere else. Still, you can't afford to be picky. Into the basket they go. In the kitchen, the magic of turnips, if you can call it magic, is all about adaptability. Boil them and you get soft, mildly flavoured chunks that taste like the colour beige. Mash them, and the result is a smoothish paste that clings to your spoon and your soul. Some days, if you're feeling daring, you roast them in the fire's embers, hoping to coax out a sweetness that may or may not exist. On truly desperate days, you eat them raw, crunchy, spicy, and a reminder that your dental health was doomed from the start. Turnips also find their way into every stew, soup, and pottage surprise you can imagine. Drop a turnip in a pot, add barley, lentils, wild greens, and maybe a prayer or two, and you've got dinner. It might not taste like much, but it's filling, and that's what counts when you spend all day chasing goats and digging ditches. Even the goats, by the way, are jealous. You know a vegetable is tough when a Roman goat gives up trying to chew it. Of course, turnips are more than just food. They're currency, insurance policy, and occasionally weapon of protest. Angry about taxes? Launch a turnip at the local collector. Just don't use your biggest one. Need a quick gift for a neighbour's wedding? A nice basket of turnips says, "I care, but not enough to give you something I'll miss." And let's not forget the turnip's role in ancient humour. Bad harvest? Blame the turnips. Tough winter? Thank the turnips for keeping you alive, even if you're starting to hallucinate rutabagas in your dreams. The local wise woman might even prescribe a poultice of mashed turnip for a headache, or suggest hanging a turnip above the door to ward off evil spirits. No one's sure if it works, but it smells powerful enough to do something. As you lay down at the end of another turnip-fueled day, you're grateful for their humble presence. They're not delicious, they're not beautiful, but they are reliable. In a world where almost nothing else is guaranteed, the turnip is always waiting. Sometimes in your stew, sometimes under your bed. Sometimes, if you're very unlucky, in your shoe. So you give thanks for the turnip. The vegetable that keeps on giving, whether you want it to or not. And tomorrow, when the tax collector returns, you'll have your ammunition ready, starchy, sturdy, and shaped exactly like hope. When you're making bread from acorns, you know things are rough. Peel, soak, grind, pray. It's like baking, but with extra steps and less joy. There are low moments in Roman peasant life, and then there's acorn season. Wheat is a memory. Barley has failed you. Even the turnips are giving you side-eye from the corner of the root cellar. So you look at the oak trees, ancient, noble, and just a little smug, and you think, maybe this is fine dining. But let's be clear, acorns are not food. They're more of a suggestion, a dare from nature, a culinary warning sign that reads, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter this forest." Still, hunger is a brilliant motivator. If squirrels can do it, how hard can it be? Spoiler, it's hard. First, you gather a mountain of acorns. This is best done when the weather is cold and your fingers are already numb, adding an extra layer of suffering. Next comes the peeling, a task so tedious you start wondering if you've angered some vengeful food god. You chip away at each shell, cursing the ancestors who thought this was a good idea. But the real fun starts with soaking. Acorns are packed with tannins, which is just a fancy word for nature's way of telling you to stop eating the landscaping. If you eat them raw, you'll immediately regret every decision you've ever made. So, you soak them, and soak them, and soak them again. Change the water, repeat, question your life choices, and marvel as the water turns brown enough to resemble that suspicious puddle outside your hut. Once they're finally, mostly debittered, you grind the acorns into a paste. It's sticky, gritty, and not even the family dog looks interested. But you press on, mixing your acorn flour with whatever you can find. Maybe a pinch of barley if you're lucky, or just pure desperation. Then you form it into a dough, slap it onto a flat stone, and bake it over the fire. This is not a bread that rises, it just sort of lies there, like a pancake that gave up halfway through. When you finally get to taste it, you brace yourself. Acorn bread is heavy, dense, and vaguely nutty, with an aftertaste that whispers, you could be eating literally anything else. It fills you up, though, and in the end, that's all you really need. The first bite is surprising. The second bite is determination. The third is just survival. Acorn bread is not something you serve to guests. It's the kind of thing you eat with your head down, silently hoping the neighbours don't notice what's on your table. If you ever find yourself trading for real bread, you guard it like treasure and serve the acorn loaf to your least favourite cousin. In the social hierarchy of Roman cuisine, acorn bread sits right below burned lentil porridge, and just above that time someone tried to ferment cabbage on purpose. Even so, there are moments of triumph. When you pull a loaf out of the ashes that isn't completely burned, when you manage to choke down a slice without flinching, you feel a strange sense of pride. Acorn bread is proof that you can survive anything: crop failure, famine, even the endless jokes from your neighbour about tree muffins. Sometimes you try to dress it up. Maybe a smear of honey, if you've managed to sweet-talk the village beekeeper. Maybe a sprinkle of wild herbs, if you're feeling fancy. But deep down, everyone knows. This is emergency food. This is bread for when there is no bread. This is the ancient Roman equivalent of microwaving ketchup packets and calling it soup. So, as you lay down at the end of an acorn-fueled day, slightly fuller but mostly just resigned, remember, acorn bread means you made it. It's not delicious. It's not even good. But you're still here, and sometimes that's the only flavor that matters. You don't just eat onions and garlic, you use them to disguise the smell of everything else, including yourself. Bonus: no one sits next to you at the communal latrine. It's morning in your Roman peasant hut, and you're already prepping the day's most reliable defense mechanism, the onion. Not because you expect it to taste good, but because you need something powerful enough to battle the odors of barley porridge, wet goats, and unwashed relatives. Onions and garlic aren't just ingredients, they're lifestyle choices. They're the ancient world's answer to deodorant, breath mints, and pest control, all in one pungent, wallet-friendly package. You chop onions for every meal. Stews, gruels, questionable pottages, everything gets a handful. Why? Because even if last night's turnip was slightly on the fermenting side, and today's lentils have a personality, a few onion slices can mask almost any culinary sin. You start to believe onions were put on this earth to save peasants from the trauma of flavor, or lack thereof. Garlic, meanwhile, is your best friend and worst enemy. On one hand, it adds an actual flavor profile, a sharp, biting warmth that makes even the blandest food taste like it was seasoned on purpose. On the other, it ensures your breath could be used as a weapon in times of social crisis. Roman soldiers used to eat garlic for courage. Peasants eat it so the local tax collector won't stay long enough to ask for extra. The real beauty of these humble bulbs, though, is their versatility. Onions can be boiled, roasted, eaten raw, or, when you're out of options, crunched like an apple while you work in the fields. Garlic can be crushed, sliced, tossed in the pot, or even strung around your neck as a charm against evil spirits and, probably more effectively, your neighbor's judgment. If you're especially desperate, you rub a little on a sore tooth or wound and hope for the best. Science is many centuries away, but it smells strong, so it must work, is practically a medical degree in the Roman countryside. You'd be surprised how much social engineering happens thanks to onions and garlic. Communal meals become a test of endurance as the room fills with the glorious, teary haze of slow-cooked alliums. The air gets thick, the conversation gets thinner, and if you sit near the hearth, your eyes will water before your appetite ever wakes up. No one's exactly sure if they're crying from the smoke, the onions, or the existential realization that dinner is just last night's stew plus more onions. At the market, onions and garlic are as valuable as coins, if not more. Got a spare bulb? You can trade for a few wilted greens, or maybe a favor from the guy who sharpens scythes. Lose your crop to disease? You'd better have a plan for next year. Because bland stew is just sadness in a bowl. Even the most jaded Roman peasant knows. A kitchen without onions is a punishment for crimes you can't remember committing. And let's not forget the medicinal side. Ancient writers swear onions cure everything from coughs to heartbreak to bad air, which is basically anything that smells unfortunate. Garlic is supposed to strengthen your body, drive away sickness, and keep evil spirits, and possibly in-laws, at bay. Sure, the science is sketchy, but you'll try anything if it means avoiding the village healer and his enthusiastic leech collection. After a day spent chopping, chewing, and wearing your bouquet of oniony garlic fragrance, you settle in by the fire, comforted by the fact that tonight, at least, the rats will keep their distance. And so will everyone else. Sleep well, wrapped in the comforting haze of ancient air fresheners. Tomorrow, you'll need them all over again. In Rome, the scent of survival is strong, and you wouldn't have it any other way. If you can name it, and it isn't poisonous, it's going in the pot. Wild herbs, dandelion leaves, and whatever else you can yank from the dirt become the closest thing you'll ever get to a spice rack. Imagine your modern kitchen with its neatly labeled jars of oregano, basil, and that one mysterious blend you bought because a celebrity chef said it was essential. Now erase all of that. Welcome to the Roman peasant kitchen, where seasoning comes from whatever green thing you find within walking distance, and the main culinary question is, will this kill me or just taste weird? Your days start with the hope that somewhere nearby, a patch of wild flavor is ready for harvest. You shuffle out at dawn, eyes bleary, dodging chickens and cursing last night's acorn bread, hunting for anything that even remotely smells interesting. Wild thyme, savory, mint, marjoram, these are the crown jewels of your weedy empire, and if you're lucky, you'll bring home a bundle that smells almost like actual food. But there's no guarantee of luxury. Sometimes your herb collection is mostly dandelion leaves, some chickweed, and a little something the neighbour swears is edible but might actually be livestock feed. Cress, purslane, even bitter wild celery. All of them wind up in the pot, because when your other option is unseasoned turnip porridge, you'll take your chances. The only real rule is, don't eat the same thing that made the goat sick. Preparation is an art form. You rinse your finds in the nearest cleanish bucket of water, pluck off bugs with a shrug, and toss everything straight into the bubbling stew. If you have any actual olive oil left, you ration it like a priceless family heirloom. Sometimes you crush the herbs between your palms, praying that friction and optimism will unlock new flavors. Every meal becomes a grand experiment in ancient gastronomy. Will it taste better? Or just greener? Some herbs actually do work their magic. A sprig of wild thyme can transform bland barley soup into something almost enjoyable. A handful of mint leaves in a salad offers a fresh shock, if you can get past the fact that it's still just leaves with a side of more leaves. Marjoram adds a faintly floral note, one that almost covers the taste of week-old turnip. Dandelion greens? Well, those are more about vitamins than vibes, but hey, you're not here to judge. Of course, there are risks. Mix up your parsley with hemlock, and your mealtime turns into an unscheduled spiritual journey. Eat the wrong weed, and you spend the night discovering the true meaning of medieval discomfort. Family lore includes a running list of herbs we no longer discuss, usually recited over the grave of a beloved sheep or a cousin who thought he was invincible. Despite the danger, the hunt for wild herbs is a treasured part of daily life. Kids get involved, learning to spot the difference between edible and let's wait until next year. Older folks become walking encyclopedias of plant wisdom, sometimes right, sometimes just loud. Market days are a parade of proud foragers, showing off bundles of what they hope will impress a neighbour or earn a decent trade. In the grand tradition of making do, Roman peasants turn weeds into something wonderful. Sure, your meals still taste like boiled hope more often than not, but sometimes, with the right blend of luck and greenery, you get a bowl of soup that surprises you. For a fleeting moment, you close your eyes and almost believe you're eating like a senator. So tonight, as you savour another mystery herb stew, breathe in the scent of wild Rome. It's not much, but it's yours. A free seasoning rack provided by nature, bad eyesight, and the unbreakable optimism of a people who survived on whatever grew at arm's reach. Sleep well. Tomorrow's flavour adventure awaits, and so does that patch of suspiciously spicy weeds behind the latrine. Chickpeas are small, round, and almost tasty if you have enough olive oil, which you don't. Still, they show up in soups, stews, and every festival nobody actually wants to attend. For Roman peasants, chickpeas are a rare but celebrated sight in the pantry. You know a feast is serious when somebody brings out the chickpeas. Sure, you might have to sweep the dirt floor, borrow your cousin's least mouldy tunic, and endure an hour of poetry about the weather, but at least you know you'll get a bowl of these precious little legumes before someone starts fighting over the last scrap of bread. Chickpeas are the wild card of Roman agriculture. They grow where other beans simply give up, but they're picky about soil, rainfall, and how much you complain about your back while weeding. When you do get a decent harvest, you guard those chickpeas like they're gold coins, hiding them away from hungry siblings and nosy neighbors who've suddenly remembered you're such a good friend. Preparation is where the real lottery begins. First, you have to soak them overnight, if you remember, or for 3 frantic hours if you don't. Skip this step, and you'll be chewing for the rest of your natural life. Then, into the pot they go, stewing with barley, wild greens, or whatever scraps survived last week's dinner disaster. Sometimes you get a fragrant, rich soup that almost feels decadent. Other times, you get a pot of half-cooked chickpea bullets floating in murky water and the distinct sense that dinner is going to be hard work. Chickpeas aren't just dinner, they're social currency. Got extra? You might swap a handful for onions, a borrowed scythe, or the privilege of not being volunteered for ditch cleaning duty this week. When festivals roll around, someone's always bragging about their chickpea recipe, as if there's a secret to making them taste like more than mild disappointment and the ghost of garlic. Despite their humble appearance, chickpeas carry a certain status. You're definitely not eating them every day. More likely, you're rationing your stash like a Roman dragon, doling out a few for special occasions, like the day after the tax collector leaves, or when a neighbour's goat miraculously fails to escape for the 3rd time this month. There are ancient stories about chickpeas making you strong, clever, or maybe just gassy enough to be remembered at the next village gathering. Some claim chickpeas are good luck, others that they're best left to philosophers and poets who don't have to hoe the fields at dawn. For you, they're a change of pace, a break from barley and despair, and possibly the highlight of an otherwise beige week. Eating chickpeas is an event. You sit down with your cracked wooden bowl, drizzle, or more likely imagine drizzling, a hint of precious olive oil, and sprinkle on whatever herbs you manage to wrestle away from the local sheep. The texture is smoothish, the flavour earthy, and for a brief moment, you get to feel fancy. Until your cousin asks for seconds, and you realise there are never enough chickpeas to go around. Chickpeas also have a way of bringing people together, if only to complain about how long they take to cook. There's always an elder with an ancient Roman trick for tender chickpeas, usually involving a hot stone, a cold stare, and 3 hours you'll never get back. No one's sure if it works, but everyone agrees it's better than nothing. As the pot empties and the fire dies down, you scrape your bowl clean and sigh contentedly. For one night, at least, you've tasted the legume lottery and come out a winner. Tomorrow, it's back to turnips and barley, but tonight, you'll dream of chickpeas, the little round treasures that turn a simple meal into a celebration. No poetry required. The rich get wine. You get whatever grapes survived the party. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's just sticky fingers and wasps. Grapes are the glamorous fruit of the Roman world, adored by emperors, poets, and anyone who can afford a toga that doesn't double as a rag. But for you, the humble peasant, grapes aren't so much a food group as an occasional windfall, something that falls off the back of a cart, literally and metaphorically. When the wealthy throw their endless feasts, the leftovers sometimes trickle down, and you're left to scoop up whatever didn't make it into the pressing vat or the landlord's goblet. You don't own a vineyard. The closest you get to grapes on the vine is when you're out in the fields, squinting jealously at rows of fruit you'll never taste until they're half fermented, slightly shriveled, and on their way to becoming animal feed. If you're especially lucky, or sneaky, you might nab a cluster after harvest, provided you're faster than the birds, beetles, and whichever noble's son is practicing archery nearby. When you do score a handful of grapes, it's a miniature celebration. You gather around the table with your siblings, each child watching like a hawk as you carefully divide the spoils. There's no question of pressing them for juice or making your own wine. These are survival grapes, eaten straight, one at a time, savouring each burst of sweetness as if you've won the ancient world's juiciest lottery. Of course, peasant grapes are usually not the plump, perfect specimens the villa servants display on silver trays. You get what's left behind, the tiny, the underripe, the bruised, and the ones with bite marks that could belong to any number of village wildlife, including your little brother. You quickly develop an eye for what's salvageable. One grape is too green, One is too squishy, one's being fought over by two wasps. The rest? Well, beggars can't be choosers. And then there's the annual grape gleaning, a tradition that sounds festive but mostly involves crawling on your hands and knees, squinting under vines, and hoping the landlord's dog is asleep. Gleaning is technically allowed. After the real harvest, whatever's left is fair game for the poor. It's a little like a supermarket sweep, if the supermarket were mostly empty and possibly guarded by angry geese. You'll fill a basket with the leftovers, sticky and grateful, and take it home for a feast that is over all too soon. Sometimes you try to be creative. If you get enough grapes and can resist eating them all at once, you mash them into a sweet tart sludge that might pass for dessert. Add it to barley bread, and you've got a treat. Let them sit for a day or two, and you discover the joys of accidental fermentation, the ancient world's answer to soda, or possibly to mild food poisoning. Peasant innovation is all about lowered expectations and strong stomachs. Of course, grapes also come with hazards. Every handful is a gamble. Will it be juicy? Or will you spend the afternoon picking seeds out of your teeth? Will you get a refreshing snack, or a mouthful of tiny spiders who got there first? Nothing says peasant luxury like shaking a grape cluster vigorously before eating it, just in case anything else wants to leave. Still, for all the disappointment, grapes are a rare joy. Their fleeting sweetness is a reminder that sometimes, even in a life of barley gruel and turnip soup, a small, unexpected pleasure can drop right into your lap, or at least roll into your reach when the rich aren't looking. You fall asleep sticky, slightly full, and only a little worried about tomorrow's chores. In the world of Roman peasants, sucking on grape leftovers isn't just survival, it's a celebration, proof that you know how to find sweetness wherever you can, even if you have to fight a wasp for it. When you're desperate for protein, even a snail looks like a decent snack. Catch them after the rain, cook them over the fire, and try not to think about texture. There are good days in the Roman countryside, and then there are snail days. No matter how you spin it, snails are the ultimate symbol of "we're making do." They aren't glamorous. They aren't heroic. They don't even try to escape very hard. In a world where the best thing you've tasted all week is a cabbage that didn't bite back, a plump snail after a thunderstorm feels like a secret bounty, provided you can get past the fact that it's, well, a snail. Rain is your friend, and so are muddy ditches. As soon as the sky's clear, you're outside with a basket and a hopeful heart, shuffling through the wet grass, scanning for tiny glistening shells. Kids are expert snail hunters. So are old ladies who have lost all shame and most of their sense of smell. There's no competition from the local dogs. They're busy elsewhere, chewing something that once had fur. Snail gathering is a community affair, but only because you're all equally desperate for dinner. Your haul is always a surprise. Maybe you find a dozen fat snails, plump and practically begging to be eaten. Maybe you find a handful of tiny, crunchy ones and consider inventing snail trail mix. Either way, you bring your harvest back home, aware that tonight's protein is brought to you by pure, undiluted necessity. Of course, you can't just eat snails right out of the shell, at least not if you want to make it to tomorrow. The Roman peasant's first step is always cleaning, which in this case means forcing the snails to fast for a day or two so their insides are less alarming. You keep them in a clay pot, watch them slime around, and try not to anthropomorphize your food. This is not a petting zoo, this is survival. When it's time to cook, there are few options. Toss them into the fire, roast them on a flat stone, or drop them into the communal stew pot. Some people claim to have recipes passed down for generations. Secret blends of wild herbs, a dash of vinegar, maybe a suspicious amount of onion. Others are just happy if the end result doesn't crunch in unexpected ways. Then there's the eating. First, you have to get the snail out of its shell. There's no elegant method, just determination and the kind of facial expression you'd wear if you were trying to convince yourself you're eating oysters at a senator's banquet. The texture is memorable, chewy, sometimes slimy. occasionally rubbery. The flavor depends entirely on what the snail ate before it met you, which is a fact you'll wish you didn't know. But there's something oddly satisfying about the ritual. The whole family sits around, slurping and chewing, trading complaints and theories about how the rich probably eat snails differently. There's always a brave soul who claims to love them, while everyone else quietly hopes for leftovers of anything else. And yet, snails keep you going. They're rich in protein, surprisingly filling, and, most importantly, free. As you finish your last snail, licking your fingers and trying to look nonchalant, you wonder how history will remember you. As a survivor, a forager, or just someone with very adventurous taste buds. One thing's for sure. If anyone ever invents a cookbook for Roman peasants, snails will be a recurring chapter, filed right after fava beans, mistakes were made. So you drift off to sleep, stomach full, if a little unsettled, grateful for the rain, the mud, and your own questionable resourcefulness. In ancient Rome, when life gives you snails, you eat them, shell, slime, and all, and live to tell the tale. Some wild greens want to hurt you, but you're eating them anyway. Chard and sorrel are a blessing. Nettles are a dare from nature. If Roman peasant life teaches you anything, it's that desperation has a flavour, and sometimes it stings. When the pantry is empty, and even the turnip basket looks barren, you turn to the wild corners of your world, where edible green things come with their own health warnings. Enter chard, sorrel, and, for those truly fearless, stinging nettles, the only salad that fights back. Chard is the closest thing you have to luxury in your diet. Its leaves are broad and shiny, its stems look almost decorative, and you can almost imagine yourself as a wealthy villa owner, plucking fresh chard from your own private garden. Almost, in reality, you're kneeling in the mud, yanking it from beside the compost heap and hoping the chickens haven't pecked it first. But it cooks down to something tender and mild, soaking up any flavour you can throw at it, which, to be fair, is usually just onion and disappointment. Sorrel, on the other hand, is a wild card, literally. It grows wherever you least expect it, under rocks, in abandoned corners, or sprouting defiantly from cracks in the wall. You chew a piece, and it delivers a tart punch, a sharp tang that wakes up your taste buds, and reminds you that plants, too, have opinions. Sorrel adds brightness to the usual beige of peasant cuisine. Drop it in a stew, and suddenly you're eating something that tastes almost intentional. And then there's nettles. If you're brave, or just hungry, you gather these with the utmost caution. Gloves would help, but who owns gloves? You roll up your sleeves, pinch carefully, and try to avoid getting stung. Inevitably, you fail. You come home with hands tingling and an expression that says, "I've made better choices." Still, nettles are packed with nutrients, and the stinging vanishes once they're boiled. Or so the elders say. You've never had the nerve to try them raw, and you suspect anyone who does is just showing off. Preparing these wild greens is an act of both skill and hope. You rinse off the dirt, flick out the occasional caterpillar, and try to forget that nettles once made you cry. Chard goes into the pot first, followed by a generous handful of sorrel, and at the very end, the nettles. Just to remind you that every meal is a lesson in humility. The pot simmers, filling your hut with a scent that is somewhere between earthy freshness and what died in the corner. As you ladle the steaming greens into your bowl, you notice everyone at the table inspecting their dinner, searching for stingers or, worse, undiscovered wildlife. The youngest sibling always gets the first taste, a time-honoured tradition that doubles as a food safety test. If they don't immediately cry or run for the water bucket, the meal is declared safe, and the family digs in with a mixture of relief and resignation. Despite the drama, these wild greens are a lifeline. Chard brings substance, sorrel brings flavour, and nettles bring, well, stories for the next village gathering. Eating them isn't just a necessity. It's proof of resourcefulness, a badge of honour that says, we survived another week on what most people walk past without a second glance. As you finish your meal, fingertips still tingling, you realize that in the grand scheme of Roman peasant dining, salad is never boring. It's wild, unpredictable, and just dangerous enough to make you feel alive. Tomorrow's dinner might bite back, but tonight you're fed, you're resilient, and you're just a little bit tougher than whatever's growing in the field. Sleep soundly, with dreams of chard, sorrel, and nettles dancing in your head, reminders that in hard times even salad can keep you on your toes. Oats in Rome? Sometimes. Usually in the north, where mornings are cold and peasants need something to regret besides their life choices. You wake up in the damp northern provinces, greeted by the chill seeping through your single wool blanket and the unmistakable sound of rain plotting against you. The rich folks in the warm south might never know the glory of oats, but up here, this is survival food. The gritty, grey, slightly slimy cousin of barley that nobody loves, but everyone eats. Oats are the uninvited guest at the Roman breakfast table. Never exciting, but always showing up exactly when you're running out of everything else. As you roll out of bed, every joint aching from the damp, you know exactly what's coming. There's no surprise, no anticipation. Breakfast is always oats, served hot, or at least warmish. Sometimes sweetened with a miracle drizzle of honey, but usually just plain, with a dash of salt and an undertone of existential dread. You sit by the fire, staring into your wooden bowl as steam curls up, fogging your memory of what happiness tastes like. Oat porridge isn't just a food, it's an experience. The texture is generous. Some spoonfuls are chewy, some gluey, some suspiciously crunchy if someone got lazy at the millstone. It's not elegant, it's not pretty, and it sticks to your ribs, and your spoon, and your fingers, and pretty much anything it touches. The dog doesn't beg for it. Even the rats show a cautious respect. But you eat it because it's there, and it keeps you going. Still, you can't deny the power of oats. They grow where other crops sigh and give up. Rocky soil? Frosty nights? Sheep rampages? Oats thrive on adversity, much like the people forced to eat them. Your field yields sacks of the stuff, which means every meal is an oat-themed adventure. Oat cakes, hard as roof tiles, oat gruel, the beverage that doubles as punishment, and, if you're feeling festive, a bowl of oats with a pinch of dried wild berries. These berries are always either rock-hard or halfway to wine, but they do their best. Oats are versatile, in the way that clay is versatile. You can shape them, boil them, mash them, bake them, and they will stubbornly remain oats. Some families boast secret recipes handed down for generations, ways to make oat porridge taste like less of an endurance test. Add some wild mint maybe, or a dollop of sheep's milk. Most of the time, these are just elaborate ways to disguise the fact that you're still eating oats. Your grandmother will say, "In my day, we had to eat them cold," as if this is a point of pride, not trauma. The local wisdom is that oats are healthy, that they make you strong, hearty, and able to withstand the bone-chilling winds of a Roman winter. And you suppose they do, if only because you have to get up and work them off, lest you freeze into an oat-fueled statue in the fields. By midday, the porridge has worn off and you're back to daydreaming about anything else. Barley bread, a roasted onion, even a stray snail with protein. For all their faults, oats are loyal. They show up in your darkest hours and keep you going when nothing else will. Maybe you don't love them, but you respect them, the way you respect a stubborn mule or an uncle who never leaves. They demand nothing except a little water, a little salt, and a lot of acceptance. As you scrape the last sticky bit from your bowl, you realize oats are the unsung hero of the northern peasant's life. Not glamorous, not delicious, not even wanted, but always there, keeping you alive, one gritty spoonful at a time. You sigh, pull on your boots, and head into the misty fields, stomach full of regret and resilience. In Rome, even breakfast is a lesson in endurance. Sleep well tonight. Tomorrow's another bowl of oats, and another chance to dream of literally anything else. Oats in Rome? Sometimes. Usually in the north, where mornings are cold and peasants need something to regret besides their life choices. You wake up in the damp northern provinces, greeted by the chill seeping through your single wool blanket and the unmistakable sound of rain plotting against you. The rich folks in the warm south might never know the glory of oats, but up here this is survival food, the gritty, grey, slightly slimy cousin of barley that nobody loves but everyone eats. Oats are the uninvited guest at the Roman breakfast table. Never exciting, but always showing up exactly when you're running out of everything else. As you roll out of bed, every joint aching from the damp, you know exactly what's coming. There's no surprise, no anticipation. Breakfast is always oats, served hot, or at least warmish. Sometimes sweetened with a miracle drizzle of honey, but usually just plain, with a dash of salt and an undertone of existential dread. You sit by the fire, staring into your wooden bowl as steam curls up, fogging your memory of what happiness tastes like. Oat porridge isn't just a food, it's an experience. The texture is generous. Some spoonfuls are chewy, some gluey, some suspiciously crunchy if someone got lazy at the millstone. It's not elegant, it's not pretty, and it sticks to your ribs, and your spoon, and your fingers, and pretty much anything it touches. The dog doesn't beg for it. Even the rats show a cautious respect. But you eat it because it's there, and it keeps you going. Still, you can't deny the power of oats. They grow where other crops sigh and give up. Rocky soil, frosty nights, sheep rampages. Oats thrive on adversity, much like the people forced to eat them. Your field yields sacks of the stuff, which means every meal is an oat-themed adventure. Oat cakes, hard as roof tiles, oat gruel, the beverage that doubles as punishment, and if you're feeling festive, a bowl of oats with a pinch of dried wild berries. These berries are always either rock hard or halfway to wine, but they do their best. Oats are versatile, in the way that clay is versatile. You can shape them, boil them, mash them, bake them, and they will stubbornly remain oats. Some families boast secret recipes handed down for generations, ways to make oat porridge taste like less of an endurance test. Add some wild mint, maybe, or a dollop of sheep's milk. Most of the time, these are just elaborate ways to disguise the fact that you're still eating oats. Your grandmother will say, "In my day, we had to eat them cold," as if this is a point of pride, not trauma. The local wisdom is that oats are healthy, that they make you strong, hearty, and able to withstand the bone-chilling winds of a Roman winter. And you suppose they do, if only because you have to get up and work them off, lest you freeze into an oat-fueled statue in the fields. By midday, the porridge has worn off and you're back to daydreaming about anything else: barley bread, a roasted onion, even a stray snail with protein. For all their faults, oats are loyal. They show up in your darkest hours and keep you going when nothing else will. Maybe you don't love them, but you respect them, the way you respect a stubborn mule or an uncle who never leaves. They demand nothing except a little water, a little salt, and a lot of acceptance. As you scrape the last sticky bit from your bowl, you realize oats are the unsung hero of the northern peasant's life. Not glamorous, not delicious, not even wanted, but always there, keeping you alive, one gritty spoonful at a time. You sigh, pull on your boots, and head into the misty fields, stomach full of regret and resilience. In Rome, even breakfast is a lesson in endurance. Sleep well tonight. Tomorrow's another bowl of oats, and another chance to dream of literally anything else. Real wine is for the gods and the landlords. You get vinegar with aspirations. But hey, at least it kills some of the germs. In the world of Roman peasants, drinking is not about luxury or flavour or even enjoyment. It's about survival. When the best water source is a creek that doubles as a laundry pit, a sheep bath, and a dumping ground for yesterday's regrets, you start looking for safer options. Enter poor man's wine, a drink so uninspiring, even the wasps turn up their noses, but just strong enough to keep you alive. The real wine, ruby red, sweet, fit for poets and parties, never touches your lips. That's for the villa owners who sip from silver cups and toast to good health, while the rest of you try not to gag on your third cup of watered-down table wine. Yours starts as the dregs. Leftover grape juice, grape skins, maybe a rogue beetle for added flavour, all dumped in a clay jar and left to do whatever fermentation is supposed to do. If it fizzes, that's just more excitement than you wanted. On feast days, you see how the other half lives. The landlord's table overflows with amphorae, and everyone pretends the conversation is more interesting after a few cups of the good stuff. Meanwhile, you and your neighbours are toasting with a beverage that is legally required to be called wine, but tastes like sour memories and watered-down ambition. You try not to think about how many people have handled this cup before you, or what exactly floated to the bottom. There are rules, of course. Roman law says even the poorest labourer deserves a daily ration of wine, never mind that it's more water than grape and has a flavour profile best described as forgiving. You dilute it because, honestly, you have no choice. Straight-up wine is a privilege. Watered wine is what keeps you hydrated, gets you through the midday heat, and, on truly desperate days, helps you forget about the taste of last night's cabbage stew. Still, there's a kind of dignity in this ritual. Pouring out a cup, passing it around, and pretending it's a celebration, not just a defense against dysentery. You add a little wild mint if you have it, or maybe a splash of honey if the bees were feeling generous. Someone always suggests boiling it, because it kills more germs that way. Others just accept the floaty bits as part of the experience. Extra protein, maybe. Kids drink it too. Small beer and sour wine are safer than water. And so, from the youngest to the oldest, everyone learns to make the best of it. You build up a tolerance for sourness, a resistance to mystery flavours, and an appreciation for the simple fact that, whatever else you drink, it probably won't kill you as quickly as the water would. Sometimes, you get lucky. A neighbour finds an old stash of raisins, a little sweet grape must, or something else to throw in the pot. For one magical evening, the wine is almost pleasant, and everyone laughs a little louder. These are rare moments, so rare that stories are told about the time the wine tasted like grapes. For most of the year, it's just something you swallow between mouthfuls of barley and bread. At the end of another long day, you pour yourself a cup of the cheap stuff, sit by the fire, and raise a quiet toast to survival. It may not taste like much, but it's the drink that built an empire, diluted, sour, and absolutely necessary. Sleep well, knowing that whatever you drink tomorrow, at least it won't be water. In ancient Rome, the poor man's wine is both a curse and a blessing, and, most importantly, it's yours. Thirsty? Good luck. The nearest stream is probably upstream of someone else's bad day. Sometimes you just risk it. There are plenty of daily gambles in Roman peasant life, eating foraged greens, trusting your cousin with a sickle, or hoping today's barley porridge is fungus-free. But nothing quite compares to the daredevil feat of hydrating. When you reach for a cup of water, you're rolling the dice with your intestines. In theory, the empire is famous for its aqueducts and public fountains. In practice, you're miles from any marvel of engineering, and the closest thing you have to running water is the trickle through a muddy ditch or whatever drips off your neighbour's leaky roof. There's a reason you drink weak wine and watery beer at every meal. Water itself is almost a last resort. The stream at the edge of the village looks pretty enough in the morning light, sparkling like something out of a dreamy travel brochure. But you know better. You know what happens upstream. Old man Gaius's goats, the neighbour kids, a suspicious amount of laundry, and, on the worst days, the aftermath of last night's communal party, all drift downstream. You think about that as you cup your hands, weighing the urgent need to drink against the strong urge to just not. Sometimes there are alternatives. Rainwater, for example, is prized if you can collect it in a clean jar before the chickens wade through it. People put out every pot, pan, and slightly dented helmet to catch a few drops. And for a brief moment after a storm, you feel rich, sipping slightly gritty water and pretending not to notice the floating specks. At least you know where it came from. Probably. If you do decide to drink from the stream, there's a ritual. First, check for floating debris. Next, squint suspiciously at anything wiggling. Worms are protein, but not in this context. Finally, say a silent prayer to whichever household god is on water duty this week, and take a cautious sip. If you don't feel your stomach rumble within the hour, you consider it a good day. If you do, well, you know where to find the communal latrine. And you remember, once again, why wine was invented. Public wells are slightly safer, but you have to wait your turn. Everyone in town comes with their bucket, trading gossip and the latest theory on how to keep water from tasting like ancient socks. Sometimes you hear about a miracle spring in the next village over fresh, cold, and so pure it probably grants wishes. You make a mental note to visit, then forget when you realize it's an all-day walk and you have oats to harvest. Boiling water is an option if you have firewood to spare. It's a luxury, really. Who has time to wait for the water to cool down, or the energy to argue with your little brother about whose turn it is to carry the bucket back from the stream? Usually you just take your chances and hope your immune system is feeling optimistic. And if you get sick, you get advice. Grandma swears by a poultice. Your neighbour suggests chewing garlic for luck. The village healer recommends drinking more water, which feels like a joke. Sometimes you recover. Sometimes you just get used to it. Roman peasants are, above all, resilient, mostly out of necessity. So tonight, as you lay down, parched but still alive, be grateful for every cup that didn't betray you. Water in ancient Rome, not a thirst, quencher, but a daily test of faith and fortitude. You close your eyes, promising yourself tomorrow you'll try the miracle spring. But for now, you sleep, a little thirsty, and very much alive, living proof that history's bravest souls drank first and asked questions later. Your kitchen is a pit in the ground, a blackened pot, and whatever sticks didn't burn yesterday. But if you can boil water, you're halfway to being a chef. This is not a kitchen with granite countertops, adjustable burners, or that one drawer full of whisks you never use. The Roman peasant kitchen is a daily exercise in survival, resourcefulness, and hoping you don't set your own eyebrows on fire. There are no appliances humming in the background, just the quiet, eternal hope that today's meal will be less of a disappointment than yesterday's. The layout is charmingly minimalist. The cooking pit is really just a shallow hole scraped into the floor, ringed with scorched stones and maybe a lucky shard of tile from a long-forgotten mosaic. Your main cooking vessel is a battered iron or clay pot, inherited from generations of peasants who each swore they'd replace it one day, then promptly forgot. The wooden spoon is your scepter, sometimes chewed on by the dog, sometimes missing entirely, and often replaced by a sturdy stick. Fire is your best friend and your worst enemy. Some days it's a roaring blaze, fueled by dry branches and the last splinters from the old goat cart. Other days, it's a sad, smoky trickle that barely warms the pot and mostly fills the room with the scent of despair and yesterday's cabbage. You keep your firewood in a pile by the door, hoping no one else in the family borrows it for their secret project or to bribe the neighbour's cat. If you're lucky enough to own a grate, congratulations, you're now the village's unofficial culinary aristocrat. For the rest of us, there's the timeless technique of balancing the pot on 3 semi-flat stones and praying the whole thing doesn't tip over into the ashes. More than one meal has been lost to a sudden kitchen disaster, followed by a group effort to sweep the food back out of the fire and call it extra smoky. Ingredients are kept close by, mostly because there's nowhere else to put them. Roots and grains are stored in sacks, tucked under benches or hung from the rafters to keep them out of reach of rats, children, and ambitious chickens. Herbs are tied in little bundles from the roof beams, their scent mingling with whatever's currently smouldering in the hearth. There's a jar for salt, if you're very lucky, a scrap of cheesecloth for straining, and a broken clay cup that now functions as a measuring device, a ladle, and, on bad days, a hat. Creativity is the #1 tool in your arsenal. Today's recipe might be everything that didn't rot this week, or the turnip surprise. If you find an egg, that's a celebration. If you find two, that's probably witchcraft. You use every part of every plant and animal, never throwing away bones, peels, or anything remotely edible. Yesterday's bread becomes tonight's thickener. Even the ashes have a purpose, scrubbing out the pot so it's slightly less horrifying for tomorrow's meal. Cooking, for a Roman peasant, is a team sport. There's always a cousin to fetch water, a neighbour's child to run for more firewood, and someone loudly criticising your stirring technique. Mealtimes are communal affairs, with everyone crowding around the hearth, bowls in hand, eyeing the pot with equal parts hope and scepticism. And yet, for all its challenges, the kitchen is the heart of the home. It's where stories are told, secrets are whispered, and plans are made. The fire glows, the pot bubbles, and you know that whatever ends up in your bowl, whether it's stew, gruel, or accidental charcoal, it was made with every ounce of effort, creativity, and stubbornness your family could muster. So you settle in, spoon in hand, grateful for the warmth and the company, and remind yourself, if you can boil water in ancient Rome, you're already winning. Sleep well, the kitchen will be waiting for you, and your creativity tomorrow. Some days you find wild berries. Other days you find out which berries are poisonous the hard way. In the unpredictable world of Roman peasant cuisine, fruit is less a food group and more of a quest. You don't just eat fruit, you chase it, you bargain with birds for it, and sometimes you wager your afternoon health for a handful of something purple and suspicious. The line between a sweet treat and a stomachache is as thin as a raspberry stem, and twice as likely to prick you. The hunt for foraged fruit usually begins when the regular pantry is looking sparse, or you just need a break from cabbage and barley. You head out, squinting in the sun, searching hedgerows, riverbanks, and the secret patch behind the latrine that only you and the local goats know about. The landscape is dotted with little surprises. Blackberries tangled in a fortress of thorns, wild plums high enough to require both ambition and a very sturdy stick, and clusters of elderberries that you hope, this year, are actually ripe. There's a sense of adventure with every expedition. Maybe you'll return triumphant, basket brimming with wild strawberries so tiny they barely count as a mouthful. Or maybe you'll come back empty-handed, your only souvenir a mouthful of seeds and an odd rash you'd rather not discuss. It's all part of the charm. Sometimes you're joined by siblings, sometimes by neighbours, sometimes by a particularly competitive goose who seems to have a personal grudge against anyone picking its favourite mulberry tree. Of course, ancient Roman fruit foraging comes with risks. Your grandmother swears she can tell which berries are safe by taste, colour, and a kind of peasant intuition only developed after decades of trial and occasionally dramatic error. The village healer insists you avoid anything too red, too blue, or too tempting. You nod, but ultimately, you know the rule. If the birds eat it and don't die, you've got a 50-50 shot. When you do find fruit, it's a celebration. The sweet, sharp bite of a wild currant, the sticky fingers from an overripe fig, the surprise burst of flavour from a handful of gooseberries. These are moments that break up the monotony of turnip stew and lentil gruel. You pop a berry in your mouth, savouring the brief spark of sugar and the fleeting memory of better meals. You might even try to share, but let's be honest, when you find a hidden patch of strawberries, you eat first and confess later. And then there are the surprises. That plump-looking berry that turns out to be sour enough to rewire your jaw, the edible fruit that delivers a night of regretful introspection and a new appreciation for blandness. You learn quickly which flavours spell trouble and which are worth the risk. Sometimes, the difference is only clear in hindsight, or in the stories told by neighbours, who all have their own tales of that one time with the wild cherries. If you're feeling fancy, or just lucky, you might bring your foraged bounty back to the kitchen, mash it into a tart, or stir it into the communal porridge for a rare hint of colour. Occasionally, you even dry or preserve some, though most of the time, fruit vanishes as quickly as it appears, snatched up by hungry hands and hopeful children. At the end of the day, foraged fruit is the Roman peasant's lottery ticket. Some days you win, a taste of sweetness, a memory of sunlight, a brief escape from monotony. Other days, you just get another lesson in humility, a berry-stained tunic, and the realization that next time you'll bring someone braver to taste test. You go to bed with the flavor of wild fruit still lingering, a reminder that even in the hardest times, nature sometimes surprises you with a little sweetness, and occasionally a mildly educational stomachache. Sleep well, and dream of berries you don't have to fight the geese for. Beans are cheap, filling, and come with side effects that guarantee you'll have your half of the bed to yourself. Beans are a staple of the Roman peasant diet for one simple reason. They grow when nothing else will, and they grow everywhere. You can plant them in the good earth, the bad earth, or that one sad patch next to the outhouse, and you'll get something. Not always something delicious, not always something you want to admit to eating, but definitely something. It's hard to overstate just how many beans you can pack into a peasant family's week. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner. If it fits in the pot, it's a meal. If it's a bean, it's a tradition. There's a rich diversity of beans on offer. Broad beans, runner beans, black beans, and mystery beans. The ones you found growing wild and decided not to ask too many questions about. Each variety brings a unique profile to your table, ranging from decent to this is mostly fiber and lies. Sometimes the beans are soft and buttery. Sometimes they're tough as pebbles, daring your molars to a medieval strength contest. The cooking process is simple: soak, boil, and pray. The prayer is optional but highly recommended, especially if you're serving the family. Nobody trusts a bean that hasn't been boiled long enough to lose all hope of resistance. Undercooked beans are a hazard, and not just to your digestion. The local healer has a story for every poorly prepared pot, most involving spectacularly embarrassing outcomes. And then, of course, there are the side effects. The classic joke is as old as Rome itself. Beans may be nourishing, but they're also nature's wind instrument. In a world without privacy, where entire families sleep together for warmth, beans are a weaponized food. You quickly learn which cousin has been snacking between meals. There's always a moment at bedtime, right after everyone's settled under the scratchy blanket, when you hear that telltale sound, and then the mad dash for the outer edge of the mattress begins. But beans aren't just comic relief, they're survival. Full of protein, minerals, and more fiber than any Roman ever asked for, beans help keep you strong enough to work the fields, chase the goats, and face another day of creative suffering in the kitchen. They're also, crucially, cheap. Landlords can take your wheat, the army can take your best cheese, but nobody wants your beans. They're the currency of the poor, a sign you're making do and refusing to starve quietly. Every peasant family has a signature bean dish, if only because bean surprise is just code for I threw in whatever we had left. Bean pottage, bean stew, beans with onions, beans with cabbage, even beans mashed into a paste and spread on the last crust of bread. These are the everyday meals of ancient Rome's survivors. The flavor profile varies from comfortingly bland to actually not bad if you close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else. Add some wild herbs or a little vinegar, and you might even impress yourself. Beans also have their place in social life. When the village gathers for a festival or communal work, there's always a giant pot simmering, feeding everyone for hours. But even in celebration, the old joke stands. Beware the crowded table after a bean feast, and always choose your seat wisely. So, as you settle in for another night, stomach full, bed mostly to yourself, windows cracked just in case, you can be grateful for the humble bean. It may not win any prizes for flavor, but it gets the job done, keeps the family running, and ensures at least a little personal space in a very crowded world. Sleep well. Tomorrow's another day, another bean, and if you're lucky, maybe a turn at the window seat. If you know what you're doing, mushrooms are a treat. If you don't, they're a hallucination. Or worse. In the world of Roman peasantry, few foods walk the fine line between delicacy and disaster quite like the humble mushroom. Foraging for mushrooms is not a casual stroll through the forest. It's an extreme sport where the stakes are high, the risks are real, and your mushroom guide is usually just your grandmother and her surprisingly fatalistic advice. If it smells like almonds, don't eat it. If it smells like death, definitely don't eat it. And if it smells delicious, eat at your own risk. You venture into the woods, basket in hand, eyes peeled for a glimmer of edible hope among the leaf litter. Some days, luck is on your side. You find plump, white buttons peeking up from the moss, or golden caps clustered around the roots of a decaying tree. These are your culinary lottery tickets, likely safe, possibly delicious, and guaranteed to spark jealousy when you return to the village. On less fortunate days, all you find are suspiciously colourful toadstools and the kind of fungus that only a goat could love. Mushrooms add a spark of excitement to the Roman peasant menu. In a diet dominated by beige barley, beige lentils, beige everything, a dish of sautéed mushrooms is a fleeting dash of luxury, a whiff of the good life you'll never quite afford. If you're clever, you'll cook them with onions and wild herbs, hoping to bring out flavours that might fool your taste buds into thinking you've landed a nobleman's supper. But with great flavour comes great responsibility. Even the bravest foragers hesitate over new mushrooms. The line between edible and deadly is thinner than your patience on washing day. Every village has stories. The cousin who went on a spirit walk after eating the wrong cap. The neighbour whose stew put him to bed for a week and left the family on edge every time someone burped. It's all part of the learning curve. If you're lucky enough to bring home a haul, there's a ritual of inspection, grandparents poking, sniffing, and occasionally scolding as they separate dinner from disaster. A little parboiling, a pinch of salt, a nervous prayer. Then into the pot they go, simmering alongside barley, wild greens, or whatever else is on hand. The resulting aroma is earthy and rich, a welcome change from the usual parade of boiled cabbage and burnt grain. You serve mushroom stew with a side of caution. The bravest or hungriest family member takes the first bite. Everyone else watches, bowls in hand, waiting for a thumbs up, or, at the very least, no immediate collapse. Once the coast is clear, the feast begins. The texture is soft and savoury, the flavour deep and woodsy. For a moment, you could almost believe you're eating something special, something from the tables of the rich, until someone crunches a bit of bark or finds a rogue slug, and the magic is broken. There's a certain camaraderie that comes from surviving another mushroom meal together. Families swap stories of close calls and lucky finds, and the local healer earns their keep identifying the mystery fungi that show up at the market. Everyone claims to be an expert, but deep down, you know it's mostly luck and the hope that the woods are feeling merciful today. As night falls, you listen for odd tummy rumbles and check for any dream sequences that involve talking trees. You go to bed full but alert, grateful for another meal that was, for once, a little more exciting than risky. Sleep well, and hope that tomorrow's forage brings more treats than trouble, because in the Roman world, every mushroom is an adventure, and every dinner might just be your last meal or your best one yet. Every Roman peasant's pot is filled with a mysterious stew. Nobody remembers when it started. Nobody dares to clean it. Pottage is less a recipe and more of an ongoing project. In the Roman peasant kitchen, the stew pot is never truly empty. It sits on the edge of the hearth, bubbling quietly through seasons, festivals, and family disputes. Ingredients come and go. Bits of barley, a wilted turnip, the last shreds of wild greens, all end up in the communal cauldron, contributing to a flavour that can only be described as historic. The real secret to pottage is momentum. Each day, the family ladles out bowls for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, topping up the pot with whatever scraps are left from the garden, the field, or last night's near disaster. Old bread becomes the thickener. Odd beans, wild herbs, and even an accidental snail or two all have their moment of glory. Some weeks, the stew leans suspiciously green. Other times, it's a symphony of beiges and browns, with the occasional chewy mystery chunk keeping everyone on their toes. Cleaning the pot is a topic best avoided. There's a general understanding that whatever has fused itself to the bottom is now part of the family. The only time anyone even thinks about scouring it is when a wedding or funeral is coming up, and even then, the matriarch declares it good luck to keep a little of the old broth for flavour. Honestly, you suspect this is just a way to avoid extra chores. What emerges from the pot each meal is unpredictable. Some days, it's hearty and nourishing, thick with lentils and onions, steaming with hope. Other days, you wonder if what you're eating has achieved sentience. Children poke at their bowls, negotiating trades. I'll give you my turnip chunk if you take the thing that's winking at me. No one ever wins these trades. Everyone loses a little dignity. Pottage is as much about ritual as it is about sustenance. The serving spoon is passed with great ceremony. And the first scoop is a moment of suspense. Will it be mostly broth or a surprise lump of last week's barley? At the table, conversation always starts with the same question. What did you put in this time? The honest answer is usually whatever was still edible. But the family pretends there's a grand plan. Occasionally, someone gets ambitious. Maybe you found a wild herb that isn't poisonous, or there's a rare surplus of lentils, and you decide to improve the flavour. The result is always met with skepticism. Is that an upgrade or just new camouflage for the same old stew? Either way, nobody complains out loud, unless they want to be volunteered for foraging duty tomorrow. Leftover pottage is a great equaliser. Nobles can keep their roast meats and fancy cakes. Your family survives on the reliable unpredictability of whatever is in the pot. Sometimes, when the moon is right and the cabbage isn't angry, you get a meal that actually tastes good. Other times, it's nutrition by surprise. Either way, you clean your bowl, because wasting food is a luxury no one can afford. And, let's be honest, scraping the last bits out is the closest anyone comes to actually cleaning the pot. But there's comfort in pottage, too. It's a living, breathing memory of every season, every harvest, every triumph and disaster. Each spoonful contains echoes of meals gone by and hints of meals to come. It's not glamorous, it's not fresh, but it's always there, always ready, always just a little bit different than yesterday. So you drift off to sleep, stomach full of something ancient and mysterious, comforted by the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brings, the pottage will be waiting. Because in the world of Roman peasants, culinary roulette isn't just a meal, it's a way of life. Finally, there's farming. Dig, plant, pray. You're always one hailstorm away from being even hungrier than you are now. There's a particular sort of hope that only a Roman peasant farmer understands. You spend your days hunched in the field, back sore, knees muddy, and mind lost somewhere between daydreams of a good harvest and intrusive thoughts about ancient locusts. Farming is not just work, it's gambling, with seeds as your chips and the weather as your opponent. Spoiler, the weather always cheats. The year begins with a frenzy of digging. Every able body, young, old, or pretending not to have a headache that morning, is out with a hoe or a shovel, hacking at the reluctant earth. Rocks are pried loose, stubborn weeds are yanked, and someone inevitably discovers last season's missing sandal buried like a sad little time capsule. As you break up clods, you silently plead with the gods for just the right balance. Not too much rain, not too little sun, and please, just this once, no mysterious late frosts. Sowing is a delicate business. The good seeds, the ones not nibbled by mice or accidentally dropped by the youngest, are carefully pushed into the soil. Rows are straightish, spacing is approximate, and every now and then you get ambitious and plant something new, like peas or poppies, just to see if fortune is feeling generous. You cover everything up, pat the earth, and let out a hopeful sigh. You've done your part. Now it's the sky's turn. Then comes the season of waiting, which is mostly just worrying with breaks for chores. You stare at the horizon, reading the clouds like a doomsday prophet, and consult the family's ancient weather wisdom. Red sky at morning, pray for the barley. Each morning you check the fields, counting sprouts, shooing away crows, and inventing new curses for rabbits. Every day without rain is another whispered plea. Every sudden storm is greeted with a mix of terror and relief. At least the dust will settle, even if half the garden floats away. Growing food is not just about seeds and soil, it's a daily soap opera. The beans look healthy until they don't. The millet promises a bumper crop, then sulks for 3 weeks. Cabbage sprouts heroically, then vanishes overnight thanks to a slug army on the march. You watch your neighbours and swap advice, each of you pretending not to notice who's using goat manure and who's just using wishful thinking. Farming isn't all disaster, though. Some days you stand back and see rows of green, real, actual food you grew with your own blistered hands. There's a quiet pride in the tiny leaves, the swelling pods, the sturdy stalks. You daydream about the harvest festival, about full granaries, about not having to barter away your last onion for a single crust of bread. You also dream about rain, sunshine, and a world where hail is a polite myth. Harvest time is an event. Every hand is needed to pull, dig, gather, and haul. There's singing, or at least shouting, and the occasional argument over who gets the last weirdly shaped turnip. The best of the crop goes to the landlord, of course, but you hide a little for the family, tucked in baskets, stashed under beds, smuggled into the kitchen in the dead of night. It's a festival of food and subterfuge. Finally, as the last load comes in and the fields lie empty, you look at your haul and feel a mixture of triumph and dread. Will it last? Did you hide enough from the rats, the mould, the next tax collector? The answer, as always, is maybe. You head to bed, hands sore, mind anxious, but heart stubbornly hopeful. Because in the world of Roman peasant farming, the cycle never ends. Dig, plant, pray, repeat. And tomorrow, it all begins again. One hailstorm, one miracle, one bite at a time. Sometimes you get hungry between meals, meaning between last week's bread crust and tomorrow's wishful thinking. Pine nuts and wild seeds are your go-to snack, if you can outsmart the squirrels. Each tiny handful is a crunchy reminder that Roman snacking was mostly just advanced foraging with extra chewing. Modern snacks come in glossy wrappers and have ingredient lists longer than your laundry line. For the Roman peasant, snacks are what you find while desperately poking around the hedgerows, hoping for a miracle that isn't shaped like a turnip. The day's best treats are usually whatever fell out of a pine cone or managed to avoid being trampled by sheep. Forget chips and cookies. Your snack aisle is the forest floor, and everything comes pre-packaged in bark, shells, or a healthy dose of suspicion. Pine nuts are a special kind of treasure. They're tiny, delicate, and delicious if you can get them. Unfortunately, so can every squirrel, jay, and neighbour with more free time than you. Harvesting pine nuts is less about agriculture and more about outsmarting the competition. You shake the tree, whack the cones, and chase off small furry thieves, hoping nobody from the villa sees you in your nut-gathering stance. If you actually manage to crack a cone open and extract those buttery little kernels, you feel like a culinary genius. For a moment, you taste luxury, an oily, nutty pop of flavour that hints at what rich people get to eat on purpose. Wild seeds are a more democratic snack, by which I mean everyone gets to eat them, whether they want to or not. There's no snobbery in foraging for seeds. You'll eat anything that looks vaguely edible and hasn't yet sprouted legs. Sunflower seeds, poppy seeds, and whatever else the wind scattered in the village green, all of them end up in your pouch, your pockets, or stuck between your teeth. Occasionally you get creative and mash them into a paste or sprinkle them over your porridge for what passes as garnish in the ancient world. Mostly, though, you just chew and chew, daydreaming of a snack that isn't also bird food. Of course, not all wild seeds are created equal. The village wise woman claims she can identify which ones are safe and which ones make you see ghosts. You trust her advice, but only after you've watched the chickens peck at something without dropping dead. Roman snacking is a game of risk and reward, with flavour somewhere in the middle and digestive safety, hopefully at the finish line. There's a certain joy in the process. You gather with friends, picking through tall grass and thorny bushes, occasionally getting poked, scratched, or heckled by passing livestock. The laughter comes when someone finds a stash, only to discover it's mostly empty shells, courtesy of a squirrel who left nothing but disappointment. Sharing is a given, one for you, one for your sibling, and maybe, just maybe, one for yourself if nobody's watching. Pine nuts and seeds aren't just snacks, they're ancient energy bars. A handful in the afternoon keeps you going until the next meager meal. You might roast them on a hot stone, eat them raw, or pound them into a paste to spread on the world's stalest bread. Even the village elders agree. When times are tough, a few pine nuts in your pouch are worth more than a purse of copper coins. As the day fades and your stomach rumbles, you savor the last pine nut, crunch the last seed, and count your tiny victories. It's not much, but it's something. And in the world of Roman peasant snacking, something is everything. So you drift off to sleep with the faint, nutty aftertaste still lingering, grateful that for at least one day you managed to beat the squirrels at their own game. Tomorrow, the hunt begins again. Sweet dreams, and may your pine cones always be full. Finding an egg in the peasant diet is like winning the ancient lottery, minus the fame or fortune. Chickens are temperamental, foxes are hungry, and every egg you actually find is a minor miracle. Do you eat it, barter it, or just stare at it like a tiny, protein-rich crystal ball? You wake up early, step out into the crisp morning air, and immediately spot your nemesis, the chicken coop. It's less of a palace and more of a loose collection of planks, wire, and hope, home to half a dozen hens who seem to regard you with the suspicion usually reserved for invading armies. These birds have been entrusted with your protein security, but, like many things in Roman peasant life, their reliability is more aspirational than actual. The hunt for eggs is an adventure worthy of a saga. You gently nudge aside a hen who protests with all the drama of a Shakespearean actor, only to find her nest empty again. Another hen has laid an egg, but on the far side of the coop, behind an old broken bucket, a pile of suspicious straw, and what might be last year's missing sandal. Sometimes you find an egg in the most unlikely places, behind the woodpile, beneath a turnip basket, or nestled cosily in your neighbour's yard where the fence is conveniently loose. On a good day, you emerge victorious, cradling a single, smooth, slightly warm egg like it's made of solid gold. You pause, considering your options. Do you eat it, savouring every bite in a breakfast so decadent you might have to apologise to the gods? Do you trade it, hoping to score a few onions or an afternoon off from ditch digging? Or do you simply admire it, basking in the rare glow of unexpected success before someone else in the family claims egg privilege by being the eldest or the smallest, or the only one who hasn't broken a bowl this week? Eggs are the ancient world's most versatile ingredient. You can boil them, roast them, scramble them, or, if you're feeling especially reckless, eat them raw, which always comes with a side of, "I hope that wasn't a bad idea." For most peasants, the egg gets stretched as far as possible, sliced into a stew, whipped into a barley cake, or hidden in a bread loaf to trick everyone into thinking dinner is fancier than it actually is. But eggs aren't just food. They're currency, status symbol, and occasionally, minor miracle cure. Got a sick child? A wise woman might prescribe a soft-boiled egg. Got a neighbour who needs convincing? A well-timed egg can seal a deal or calm a feud, at least until the next chicken escapes. Even the village healer swears by eggs for everything from bruises to curses, though you're pretty sure he just likes omelettes. Of course, the greatest danger is the fox. Foxes love eggs even more than you do, and a clever fox can clear out your coop faster than you can say, Roman omelette. Every peasant has a story about the egg thief of the night. Part fox, part myth. Part family excuse for why there's no breakfast today. When you do finally eat an egg, it's an event. The whole family gathers, bowls out, eyes wide, waiting for that burst of rich, yellow yolk. The taste is pure, comforting, and almost overwhelmingly satisfying. For a moment, you forget about the chores, the cold, and the ever-present hunger. As the sun sets, you tuck the last eggshell into the compost heap, feeling a little lighter, a little luckier, and a lot more grateful for the small miracles of Roman peasant life. Sleep well, with dreams of hens in generous moods, foxes kept at bay, and tomorrow's breakfast just waiting to be discovered beneath a pile of straw, or, if you're lucky, right where you left it. If you live near water, congratulations, you now have access to the world's most suspicious fish. Whether it's a muddy carp, an adventurous eel, or something with too many eyes, it's dinner if you can catch it and survive the aftermath. Spoiler: nobody trusts the guy who always brings mystery fish stew. Fishing, in the world of Roman peasantry, is equal parts hope, patience, and deep-seated skepticism. Forget the serene paintings of men by sparkling rivers, all gentle splashing and contented smiles. Your reality is ankle-deep in a muddy ditch with a homemade net, cold toes, and the looming suspicion that what you just pulled up is evolving in the wrong direction. The good news? It's protein. The bad news? There's a 50% chance you'll spend the night listening to your stomach's greatest hits. The local stream is a neighborhood landmark, but not always for the reasons you'd hope. It's a drinking hole for the animals, a public bath on festival days, and an emergency laundry service after anything involving turnip soup. Somewhere in between, the fish live, or at least do their best. You set your traps at dusk, hoping the competition, the neighbor's kids, a flock of herons, and a very determined hedgehog won't get there first. Some days you return to find nothing but soggy weeds and a single, extremely judgmental frog. Other days you come back triumphant with a flapping haul of something you hope won't bite back. Dinner preparation starts with a round of, "What is it?" The kids place bets, the dog sniffs suspiciously, and the family elder swears up and down that, back in my day, fish had the decency to look like fish. Muddy carp, river perch, and the ever-mysterious eel, which always manages to look faintly disapproving, are the main offerings. Occasionally, you catch a true oddity, something pale and blind from the deepest mud. That's when you consider skipping dinner entirely. Cleaning the fish is a spectacle. You scale, gut, and inspect every inch for surprises, all while trying to keep the smell from taking over the entire kitchen. Fish bones are as much a part of the meal as the meat, and picking them out is a test of patience, dexterity, and dental confidence. Some cooks swear by boiling the fish into a rich, hearty stew, but everyone knows that's just a way to disguise the flavor of mud and mystery. A handful of wild herbs, a squeeze of wild garlic, and a hopeful prayer round out the recipe. The first bite is always a leap of faith. Sometimes it's delicious, fresh, briny, a little wild. Other times you're treated to an unexpected crunch, an alarming pop of river grit, or a flavor profile best described as experimental. In the event that the fish is actually edible and stays down, you consider the meal a rousing success. If not, well, you learn to keep a bucket handy, just in case. Mystery fish stew is infamous in the village, not least because the guest list always gets suspiciously short on the nights it's served. The guy who brings it is both admired for his bravery and gently avoided the next morning. The social politics of fish are complex. Trade a good catch for eggs or bread, but never, ever try to pawn off the pale, bulgy, eyed ones. That's just bad manners, and possibly a health hazard. Despite the risks, there's something almost exciting about fish from the ditch. Every dinner is an adventure, a roll of the dice between nutrition and regret. On lucky nights, when the fish is fresh and your stomach is strong, you go to bed a little more satisfied, a little less hungry, and a lot more grateful for whatever fortune swam your way. So as you settle in, belly rumbling with cautious optimism, remember, in ancient Rome, culinary bravery often meant eating whatever you could catch and living to laugh about it the next day. Sweet dreams, and may your next mystery fish be the good kind. You're late for work. Again. So you grab the only things ready to go, a slab of hard bread and whatever cheese hasn't turned green. This is the Roman version of a drive-through, except the only thing fast about it is how quickly the bread breaks your tooth. Roman peasants don't have the luxury of a lazy breakfast. or the blissful scent of fresh pastries drifting from a city bakery. Instead, you have the comforting crunch of last week's bread, which now doubles as both sustenance and improvised building material. Cutting through a loaf is a test of strength. Eating it? That's a contest between your jaw and physics. If you're especially unlucky, you get to discover exactly when the bread transitions from rustic to fossilized. Historians will later marvel at your dental fortitude. Cheese is a mixed blessing. On one hand, it's packed with much-needed calories and the kind of protein that keeps you upright through a long day in the fields. On the other, it's a ticking time bomb of mold, texture, and aromas that can only be described as historically significant. Each morning, you conduct the ceremonial inspection, scrape off the questionable bits, give it a sniff, and try not to think about how many times it's been dropped in the hay. Sometimes you find a hidden soft spot, a brief oasis of flavor. Sometimes the cheese fights back. Eating on the run is an art form in itself. You wedge the bread under your arm, juggle the cheese, and make your way out the door, all while trying not to trip over the family dog, who is just waiting for crumbs or a full block of cheese. If you're distracted for even a second, there's no napkin, no plate, and absolutely no chance that what you're eating is still warm. But as you trudge down the lane, bread in one hand and cheese in the other, you remind yourself that this is the breakfast of survivors. Fast food in ancient Rome is all about efficiency. You don't have time for fussy cooking. The field is waiting. The landlord's already angry, and you still haven't found your left sandal. Bread and cheese are your go-to fuel, reliable in their stubborn refusal to go bad, or at least to get any worse. They're also portable. Slip a hunk of bread into your pouch, and you can gnaw on it between hoeing, hauling, and dodging stray geese. The bread is, in theory, a blank canvas. On very rare celebratory mornings, you might have a smear of honey, a leftover olive, or a wild herb tucked inside. Most days, you're just glad it's still technically edible. Cheese, for its part, is never boring. Hard as a rock? Grate it over the bread and call it peasant parmesan. Oozing and runny? Smear it with reckless abandon. Somewhere in between? Congratulate yourself on perfect timing and enjoy that rare moment of culinary harmony. Lunch isn't so different. Bread and cheese again, maybe with a side of boiled greens or a questionable onion if fortune smiles. Dinner, naturally, is pottage, but you might sneak a last nibble of cheese before bed, savouring its tangy aftertaste and ignoring the distant rumble of your neighbour's goats plotting their next midnight raid. For Roman peasants, bread and cheese are more than just a meal. They're a survival strategy, a comfort, and a mildly hazardous adventure. You chew, you swallow, and you carry on. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. So, as you drift off to sleep, jaw slightly sore and dreams full of imaginary bakeries, you can be proud. In the race for ancient fast food, you're not just a survivor. You're a champion, one broken tooth at a time. Once or twice a year, the Roman calendar throws you a bone, sometimes literally. Feast days mean extra bread, a glimmer of meat, and communal stews that almost taste festive. For a brief, shining moment, you eat like someone who doesn't have dirt permanently embedded under their fingernails. Feast days are circled in every Roman peasant's mind like tiny beacons of hope. While most of the year is a marathon of barley gruel and emotional resilience, a festival means a sudden, dazzling explosion of food, and not just more of the same, actual variety, colour, and, if you're lucky, flavour. The mood in the village shifts as the date approaches. Everyone's working double, tidying huts, sweeping out corners that haven't seen daylight since the last feast, and pretending not to be too excited for fear of jinxing it all with excessive optimism. Preparations start days in advance. The ovens and hearths roar to life. People scurry about with sacks of grain, and someone is always shouting about the missing ladle. Every family digs out their best bowl, the one that only has one chip and doesn't smell like old onions. There's bargaining in the market, bartering with neighbours, and, if you're clever, sneaking a taste of the communal stew before anyone's looking. Meat is the centrepiece. It might be a skinny chicken, a suspiciously scrawny goat, or, in years of real luck, a chunk of pork that looks like it might actually fill a plate. The whole process is equal parts culinary ritual and social theatre. The elders carve with great ceremony while the children eye the plates with a silent, desperate intensity usually reserved for hungry wolves. The youngest always get a bit of the choicest meat, part tradition, part insurance policy, just in case the gods are watching. The bread is fresh, soft, and piled high, sometimes even baked with herbs, seeds, or, on the most sacred of days, a hint of honey. The smell alone makes everyone lightheaded. And then there's the communal stew, a bubbling cauldron of beans, wild greens, lentils, onions, and every leftover the village could scrounge, seasoned with actual optimism and, if someone's grandmother is feeling generous, a pinch of her secret spice blend. No one really knows what's in it, but it's agreed that it tastes like happiness if happiness could be eaten with a spoon. Dessert is never guaranteed but always dreamed about. Maybe some baked fruit, or a sweet cake if the harvest was good and the local bees cooperated. Sometimes it's just a handful of nuts or a cup of weak wine that tastes a little less like vinegar than usual. Either way, by the time the meal winds down, everyone's loosened their belts, unbuttoned their tunics, and made a silent vow to never eat again. Until next year. Feast days are about more than food. They're the glue of village life, a chance to gossip, dance, play games, and forget, for one blessed evening, the endless cycle of work and worry. Old arguments are put aside, romances blossom, or at least survive a little longer, and everyone, for a few glorious hours, remembers what it's like to feel full, both in belly and spirit. Of course, tomorrow it's back to the usual. Crusts, crumbs, and leftovers from the feast, jealously guarded or traded for favours. But for tonight, as you settle by the dying fire with the taste of roast meat still lingering, you let yourself believe in abundance, however fleeting. You drift off to sleep, the laughter of neighbours echoing in your ears, the comforting ache of a well-fed stomach reminding you that, however hard the rest of the year, on feast days, peasants really do get seconds. And sometimes, in the ancient world, that's all the celebration you need. So, as you drift off tonight, cosy in your bed, surrounded by clean sheets, a fridge full of options, and exactly 0 turnips under your pillow, maybe spare a moment for the Roman peasants who came before you. The ones who greeted every morning with a rumbling stomach, a hopeful sigh, and the unshakable suspicion that today's pottage was also last week's pottage. It's easy to laugh at the idea of eating barley gruel for breakfast and acorn bread for dinner. But for generations, this was survival, one muddy footstep, one weedy garden, one questionable egg at a time. Their lives were tough, unpredictable, and a little bit absurd. Food was never guaranteed. Water was a gamble. And yet, somehow, they endured, raising families, telling stories, and finding moments of joy between bouts of rain, hunger, and goats stealing the best spot by the fire. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in with all the blessings of modern life, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the people who came before, who survived on hope, onions, and the occasional lucky fish. Remember that history is full of stubborn, hopeful, and slightly ridiculous souls who refuse to give up. Even when dinner was a bowl of lentils and a handful of wild greens, you don't have to wake up at dawn and milk a goat tomorrow. You won't be trading your last pine nut for a cabbage. And the only snails in your house are probably a design choice. So breathe easy, relax, and let gratitude fill your heart as you drift away. Because if Roman peasants could survive on cabbage, barley, and pure willpower, you too can make it through whatever tomorrow brings. Sleep well, dream gently, and remember, no matter how weird or hungry history gets, you are safe, warm, and, at least tonight, snail-free. Good night.